Thanks very much, Kim. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I share my thoughts on MDG 3, I heard about 3 men hiking up the wilderness, and they came upon this violent, raging river. They needed to get on the other side to make it across. The first man said, "God, give me the wisdom to make it across." And poof, God gave him big arms and strong legs, and he swam across the river in 2 hours. The second man said, "God, give me the strength plus the tools. I need to make it across." Poof, God gave him a boat, and he was able to row across in 30 minutes. The next man said, "God, give me the wisdom, give me the tools and the intelligence to make it across." And poof, God turned him into a woman. She looked at the map, hiked up 5 minutes upstream, and then walked across the bridge. Thank God for women. When I was given the title by the organizers of the World Marketing Summit, Women Together, the Mission and Hope for the World, I thought to myself that this topic could be aptly called Women Are Heroes. I just want to ask round across the table, put up your hands if you are a social entrepreneur. Any social entrepreneurs? No? Or you have been or still is involved in community work? Put up your hands. Don't be shy. Great. Or you have been involved in impactful and transformation projects which have impacted lives. Don't be shy. Put up your hands. Great. We have already many heroes amongst our midst. The mission and hope for the world. Please give yourselves a round of applause by making a difference to the lives of those that you have impacted. Here is my list of famous women, all women who have won the Nobel Peace Prize. But here is my list of unknown women heroes. Women who have been in Vietnam, in Bosnia, and even in Africa. But of course, one unknown heroine is Violet Richardson Ward, the founder and president of the Oakland Club, Sroptimis International Oakland Club in California. The first project that they had was Save the Redwoods. To stop the great ancient trees from being felled, they lobbied the legislature, took on powerful lumber companies, and won the support of the public. Of course, the rest is now history, and a major portion of the forest was set aside and still exists today. I represent Sroptimis International, region of Malaysia, and proud to be a Sroptimis. Sroptimis comes from 2 words, Soro meaning sister, and Optima meaning the best, and it's women at their best, helping other women to be at their best. We are a service organization, not a charity organization. When we raise funds for our projects. Our organization's focus is on women and girls, and it's my pleasure to share with you some of our Sroptimis quadrennial projects. These projects have been supported and shared by all our Sroptimis around the world. How women helping other women to be their best have impacted women around the world. SIAM, or Sroptimis International AIDS Mediation. This quadrennial project was conducted in Chiang Rai Province, Thailand, and was designed to address the issues of the high rate of HIV infection in the region and the number of young women entering the CSI. No, not your CSI New York or your CSI Miami, but the commercial sex industry, where poor families would sell their girls as they were too poor to support them. Working in partnership with the Population Community Development Association, income-generating projects were set up in 10 villages in Chiang Rai region, as well as occupational training for young women and their families with a revolving loan fund to support these activities, as I provided education about HIV/AIDS and CSI to the whole community, and both formal and non-formal educational scholarships to 12 to 25-year-old women and girls. Now, typical subjects of occupational training included northern Thai, style weaving, passion fruit growing, and basket making. Village banks were set up, run and regulated by the villagers themselves. And today, an ongoing endowment fund has been set up, and the project has been sustainable since 1995, working with 20 villages to prevent their young women from entering the commercial sex industry. This is a very interesting project we had, Project Independence for Women of Survivors of War in Afghanistan, Bosnia, and Rwanda. Disruptives International worked with a fellow women organization, Women for Women International, to address the immediate and long-term needs of women in conflict and post-conflict environments in Afghanistan, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Rwanda, as well as to support 1,200 individual women directly as they move from victim to survivor to active citizen through 3 programs within the project. Now, the project was extremely important to Disruptives members, who tirelessly conducted creative awareness, advocacy, and action programs to support and promote it. Some of these included providing sponsorships. Each woman would get a small stipend and assigned a Disruptive sister who would send letters to her of encouragement and emotional support for that entire year. Renewing women's life education training, this gave them practical skills for life. Health, money management, leadership development rights, training, and many more topics. Job skills training. Each woman learned specific job skills that would assist her in supporting herself in the future. Women chose to choose skills to learn more who would be sustainable after the program, and they learned how to produce reliable products and how to market them after they produce them. Microcredit loans in Bosnia and in Afghanistan. 600 women endorsed microcredit loans, received microcredit loans after they graduated to help them start their own business. Here's a story about Fashta. Fashta lives with the 7 children in a village in Kabul province. Before the war started, she started in Kabul and worked in tailoring. She had a very low income, but when the war started, her family was forced to move away, although they could not afford to leave the country. Fashta joined the Disruptive Sponsorship Program and received a microcredit loan to expand her tailoring business. She joined a group of women in her community and received a loan of 8,000 Afghanis, approximately $160. She told us, "I was doubtful before getting the loan and was not sure even I could be able to repay. But soon it appeared that it supported my business, and I started to make more income." Her business prospered, and she was able to provide better food and clothing for her children. And as the business continued, she paid off her first loan, took up additional loans from the microcredit program. She plans to establish a fully fledged tailoring company so that she can continue to improve her family's financial situation and livelihood, as well as contribute to her economy. Fashta was part of the 1,960 women sponsored. She was also one of the 600 women who received microcredit loans. But the biggest impact was in Rwanda, when 25% of the participants are now elected officials. In a partnership with Hope and Homes, Project Sierra, A Family and a Future, we celebrated reaching the 1 billion fundraising target to meet disadvantaged women and children in Sierra Leone in October 2011. In 2003, Sierra Leone celebrated its first year of peace over a decade. During the 10-year civil war, 500,000 people were murdered, raped, or left with horrific injuries, and over half of the population was made homeless. What was worse was that lone women of frail grandparents still had many households, and more than 70% of the population were unemployed. Life expectancy for women is 42 years in that country, and nearly a third of the children die before their 5th birthday. As a result, a legacy of poverty destroyed thousands of lives, homes, and families every year. By providing healthcare, counseling, education, vocational training, and access to the childcare, Project Sierra is improving the lives of some of the most deprived women and children in Sierra Leone. Here's our impact from our work in Sierra Leone. 129 young mothers have completed their education or vocational training. 200 families have been stabilized, and 48 former street children reconciled with their families. Birthing in the Pacific. Imagine in a developing country, a hospital with over 1,000 births occur every month, but yet 7 of the birthing mothers will die. Imagine that the country has the second worst maternal and infant mortality rate in Asia, that 88 to 89% these deaths are preventable, and yet 40% of the rural clinics are closed. That country is Papua New Guinea, where the Southwest Pacific Project, Birthing the Pacific, began as a visionary initiative suggested by an individual member. That project aims to reduce the risk of maternal and infant mortality by improving the maternity skills of midwives and nurses in Papua New Guinea. This is the focus of MDG 5A2, which seeks to increase the proportion of births attended by skilled health personnel, a factor widely recognized as the single most effective way of reducing maternal and infant mortality in developing countries. My fellow Sroptimist May spoke at length yesterday, and I'm sure many of you were very touched by what she shared. But for me, I will not dwell too much in the details, as you'll be all you can approach me after this project speech, and you have a word with her. But this is what we have achieved to date. Close to 500,000 Aussie dollars have been raised by SR groups worldwide. Now, if you look at the pouch of essential tools in the slide, 120, they call it Karim Wok Bilum items, which is a pouch of essential tools for safe delivery, have been purchased or donated. 16 neonatally dolls, as you see in this picture, and 30 other birth education aids have been purchased for use in training. 68 village birth attendants have completed their literacy and reproductive health education programs, and 25 community health workers have completed maternal health competency programs. I have just illustrated how women working together, they are the mission and hope of the world, of impacting the lives that we reach out. But now let me touch on a little of MDG 3 and let the success of progress. Despite our significant progress in achieving gender parity in primary schools, statistics continue to indicate a global gender parity index of 0.96, meaning there's still 96 girls for every 100 boys in primary schools, with significant variations within and between regions and countries. Gender inequalities in primary school are greatest in Western and Central Africa, South Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. Meanwhile, at secondary school, of 75 countries surveyed, only 22 are considered on course to meet this gender parity goal, while 21 will need to make additional efforts, and 25 far from the goal. At secondary level, the gender gap is most pronounced in South Asia. 44% of boys of secondary school age in secondary school, compared to only 36% of girls. And in Middle East and North Africa, 54% of boys compared with 43% of girls. Although I'm pleased that Malaysia has more than met this goal, as girls now comprise today 60% of the university students. But we need to recognize that 2/3 of the world's 1 billion illiterate adults aged 15 and above are women. Uneducated girls are at a risk more than boys to become marginalized. They are more vulnerable to exploitation. They are more likely than educated girls to contract HIV/AIDS, which spreads twice as quickly among uneducated girls than those girls that have some schooling. Nearly a third of all adults living with HIV/AIDS under the age of 25, and almost 2/3 of these people are women. As unschooled adults, these girls will be put, I would like to say, socially and politically disadvantaged and not be able to support themselves. Women's rights and access to land, credit, and education are linked not only to legal discrimination, but because more subtle barriers such as their workload, mobility, and low bargaining position in the household and community prevent them from taking advantage of their legal rights. And of course, these problems affect the children. Women earn only 1/10 of the world's income and own less than 2% of property. So households without a male head and a special risk of impoverishment. Mr. Shahid Malik, who spoke on the first day on MDG, once said very aptly that women are the university of our children. But we need to recognize that despite the failure to prioritize these areas, women are actually making progress. Over the last 50 years, women's participation in the labor force has been increasing in all developed regions. However, it is equally clear that these gains are not automatic and depend heavily on the terms of which they access these resources. Research from Action Aid UK shows that women now make up a large proportion of the workforce in global supply chains, almost 90%, fulfilling demand for cheap, flexible labor to pick, pack, and stitch goods for markets in rich countries. The research demonstrates that empowerment gains for these women are often limited by low pay, dangerous conditions, and discrimination and harassment in the workplace. It should be noted that despite the substantial contribution of economic growth, women's income is growing at a much slower rate than that of men. The indicator on economic participation also fails to touch on the double burden of paid employment and care work faced by many women. Despite women's participation in the formal economy, they still do the majority of unpaid domestic work, from collecting food and water to food preparation and care in the home. In countries severely affected by HIV and AIDS, this burden of care can become especially heavy for women. But yet, poor performance need not necessarily determine future action. There are strong examples of success waiting to be built on. For example, Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in Asia, has made dramatic strides in increasing girls' access to education and improving women's health through a mix of targeted policies and high-level political commitment. In Rwanda, the women have won a strong political voice and now account for half of the parliamentarians. But I'm afraid this cannot be said much of Malaysia, which has a dismal 5.7%. Only 2 women ministers out of our 35 full ministerial positions. And this has been the case since 2009, where we have been stagnant at 2 women ministers and even dropped to 1 when the Prime Minister took over the Ministry of Women. Now, the Beijing Platform for Action recommended the government set a target of 30% of seats for women in national parliaments. But the MDGs have failed to live up to the ambition. Globally, women only make up 17% of parliamentarians, and on current trends, the Beijing budget will not be met until 2068. So what have been the reasons for the laggard success? They say poverty. For many of the world's rural poor, poverty is not just a question of income. Indeed, there are many factors that force women onto economic fringes, among them physical and social isolation, discrimination and gender inequality, ineffective government policies, and a lack of political representation. For many, poverty is further aggravated by AIDS, HIV, which has devastated most of southern and eastern Africa. Millions of small farmers have died, and many more are too sick to tend their fields. Like all good pictures, take a deeper look and you'll see more. The woman in the photograph appears to be enjoying a light rain. Subsistence farmers around the world depend on rainfall to grow crops. The cycles of drought, worsened by erratic weather patterns associated with global climate change, makes it increasingly difficult for poor farmers to grow enough food to feed their families, let alone harvest crops to sell. In the case of the farmer in the photograph, one can't help but wonder, how could she get her produce to markets, and if in a good year she has any surplus to sell? There's no evidence of a road, a town, or even a power line. Indeed, in looking at the photograph, one might ask, is she there at all? Toiling in a harsh environment with a handhold. For many who struggle to survive in highly degraded rural environments, the answer to the question is simple: they have no choice. Many of the world's rural poor are indigenous peoples who have been pushed onto the least fertile and the most fragile lands. In these isolated places, far from centers of commerce and power, they have few opportunities to improve their lives, to access basic services, or to influence the institutions and policies that could change their lives. Empowering rural women is an essential first step in eradicating poverty. It respects the willingness and capability that each of us has to take charge of our own lives and to seek out opportunities to make it better. One of the most effective ways of reducing poverty in rural communities is by supporting the ingenuity of rural people. Self-employment constitutes 50 to 70% of the labor force among the poorest populations in developing countries. In fact, it's estimated that over 500 million individuals run micro-businesses. Yet fewer than 10 million of these people, or about 2.5%, are even able to obtain loans from banks or traditional lending institutions. Poor people seldom have the income or collateral to obtain the loans, but even when they do, the amounts they require are often too small to appeal to banks. Worldwide, the gulf between the amount of credit extended to the rich and the amount of credit extended to the poor grows daily. Accessing small amounts of credit at reasonable interest rates gives people with the willingness and know-how an opportunity to set up small business. Records show that poor people represent a good risk, with high employment rates than conventional borrowers. In countries as diverse as Bangladesh, Benin, and Dominica, loan repayments are as high as 97%. A 1999 study of Bangladesh microcredit programs, for example, found that women defaulted on loans 1/3 less than men. The study also found that credit extended to women had a much greater impact. Household consumption, for example, was twice as greater when the borrowers were women, translating into improved quality of life for children. 75% of the world's poorest people live in rural areas. Microfinance is one way of fighting poverty in the places where the poorest people live. Using small loans to purchase seed, fertilizer, loans, and nets, or to start up micro-enterprises, millions of rural women and men are given the opportunity to find their own solutions. Mrs. Sarah Ismail Muhammad spoke on impact investments on day one, and I believe that women are good investments. Coming on to another very important aspect is violence against women and girls. Combating violence against women and girls is central to goal number 3. Since violence against women has such serious impacts on women's lives and health, productivity, and well-being. Now, much has been covered by our speakers, and I would just want to highlight that violence against women and girls has undermined the achievement of current MDGs. Violence against women and gender equality result from a complex array of interwoven factors. These include harmful gender norms and traditions. Social acceptance of violence is an accepted means of conflict resolution. Violence of women is often embedded in social customs and allows it to be perpetrated with impunity, even in many cases without even being considered as violence, let alone a crime in many parts of the world. Women have no social or legal recourse against violence by their husband or their partner. Harmful gender roles can be reinforced by traditional practices such as widow cleansing, wife inheritance, child marriages, and female genital mutilation. Many of you would have read or heard about 15 days ago about an 8-year-old Yemeni girl identified as Rawan, who died of internal bleeding on her wedding night after marrying a man 5 times her age. On the wedding night and after intercourse, she suffered from bleeding and uterine rupture, which caused her death. Othman, a social activist, told Reuters, they took her to a clinic, but the medics couldn't save her life. Othman said authorities had not taken any action against the girl's family or her husband. Many poor families in Yemen marry off young daughters to save on the cost of bringing up a child and earn extra income from the dowry given to the girl. Quoting United Nations and government data, nearly 14% of Yemeni girls were married before the age of 15 and 52% before the age of 18. And many Yemeni child brides-to-be are kept from school when they reach puberty. In addition, dowry and bride brides can become a basis for demands, resentment, threats, and abuse by husbands and in-laws, and women who try to leave abusive marriages may be murdered or even driven to suicide. Women and girls are killed because they are thought to have tarnished the honor of their husbands or families. Since such murder is considered justified, the perpetrators face no consequences. Greater equality and empowerment will help many women to avoid violence. But the violence will never disappear unless men can change their attitudes and respect violence against women and as acceptable behavior in any context, including in the home. Much has been spoken about the increasing importance of education. Educated girls have more choices in marriage, in childbearing, in work, and in life. Yet many girls face cultural and economic barriers that prevent them from attending schools in developing countries. Nearly 2/3 of the 110 million primary school-age children are not attending schools are girls. Many of us remember feisty Malala Yousafzai, who spoke at the United Nations. I speak not for myself, but for those without voice, those who have fought for their rights, their right to live in peace, their right to be treated with dignity, their right of opportunity, their right to be educated. The Taliban closed all the girls' schools. She had no access to education, but that did not deter her. The Taliban wanted her dead, but she survived, and the rest is history. As I reiterated earlier, education is the key. There are many reasons for promoting girls' education. Educated women, for example, marry at an older age and have fewer children. In fact, in cultures where it's common for girls to marry as young as 13 or 14 years of age, just one extra year of schooling reduces fertility rates by 5 to 10%. Educated women are better prepared to play decision-making roles in their homes and communities, and they tend to be more productive at work and better paid. And in some countries, returns on educational investment are actually higher for women than for men. Studies from a number of countries suggest an extra year of schooling will increase a woman's future earnings by over 15% compared to 11% for a man. So what's the way forward for MDG 3 beyond 2015? It's a couple more years, and we have not reached that. No doubt the governments will develop a post-2015 MDG framework, but a new framework must address the root cause of inequalities, and that framework must aim to transform power relations and address the root causes of inequality rather than the symptoms. Then it can be successful in helping women escape poverty. To also be successful, the new framework must be based on principles of human rights and inequality, and reflect the lessons learned from the first MDG framework. But a new framework should be accountable and measurable and should contain accountability mechanisms with a focus on data gathering. One of the major weaknesses in the first MDG framework was the lack of data. Governments must agree to step up their efforts to gather data, and then monitoring should be segregated by age, marital status, gender, economic quintile, educational program, and geographical locations to ensure that the inequalities affecting the most marginalized groups are recognized and recorded. The new framework should include a special goal on gender equality, as it should be recognized that the realization of women's rights is a key enabler to sustainable development. One which goes beyond the existing targets to access education and maternal mortality, but which addresses discrimination against women and girls, such as gender-based violence, legal discrimination, and harmful traditional practices. This is a bit small, but the main thrust is gender matters. It is also essential to include a target on violence against women and girls, as a failure to make progress on this issue will increase the likelihood of failure on other goals and targets. This shows that once data is collected and more meaningful, more realistic actions can be taken. And this is a proportion of women experiencing physical violence at least once in their lifetime or in the last 12 months. Finally, let us ensure that all unmet existing goals that have not been renewed or reframed with greater ambition, to see them achieved with gender indicators included throughout, such as progress towards gender parity at secondary education level, and a new goal on sexual and reproductive health, including HIV, recognizing women's vulnerability on contacting HIV. In conclusion, we, women and optimists, are the motivators and connectors between the organizations and the impact investors and the women we serve. I would like to give an invitation to all women in this room to come and join us to make the difference. Before I close, I'd just like to leave you with some words from J.K. Rowling, the author of the best-selling Harry Potter, who said, "If you choose to use your status and influence to raise your voice on behalf of those who have no voice, if you choose to identify not only with the powerful, but with the powerless, if you retain the ability to imagine yourself into the lives who do not have your advantages, then it will not only be your families who celebrate your existence, but thousands and millions of people whose reality you have helped change. We do not need magic to change the world. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already. We have the power to change for the better." Thank you.